Now it works.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Minister Mas, and we welcome you today in joining this session. And also, I wish to congratulate Germany on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for this month. And I would like also to thank the Secretary General for his briefing and the efforts of UNSMIL, led by Stephanie Williams, during these difficult times. I also want to deliver the speech on behalf of my Foreign Minister, Mohamed Siada, and I thank you for accepting our request to speak last, because we needed to listen and reflect to all these statements, which topped up to 32. Although we wanted to speak in Arabic, so I hope the Secretariat will fix this issue in the future in terms of translation. Mr. President, I take this opportunity to thank Germany and Ms. Angela Merkel for her efforts to reach international consensus and find a peaceful solution to the Libyan crisis. Today's meeting comes in an important time and in the presence of all these countries. It's a good chance to officially announce the failure of the adventure led by the aggressor, which he named jihad and the open conquest. I hereby announce today the fulfillment of our previous promise that the invader won't ever enter Tripoli, and he didn't. Thanks to our national army and our valiant armed forces, we announce the triumph of our Operation Burkan al-Ghadab, which represents the victory of those who call for a civil and democratic state over the defeated scheme of state militarization. The resilience of Tripoli is a symbol of resilience against all plots of counter-revolutions and those who support them, not only in Libya, but on behalf of the entire region. Ladies and gentlemen, as I have previously stated in my early briefings, since 2011, my country has witnessed attempts by several states to extend their control over Libya, plunder its wealth, and tear its national and social fabric. Those states benefited from the events to create chaos and settle scores on our land. They took advantage of opportunists to achieve their agendas by suppressing the dream of a democratic transformation that the Libyans aspire to. Today, while listening to your briefings, Libyans are wondering, now you are talking about a political settlement and dialogue? Where were you more than a year ago when bombs were falling on innocent people and thousands of civilians, including children and women, were killed? Where were you when our civilian infrastructure was being bombed and hundreds of thousands were displaced? All these violations and war crimes occurred before your eyes. What did you do to stop them? And what have you gained from this bloody adventure launched by a rebel obsessed with power? Today, we are hearing calls for reasoning, wisdom, and dialogue. But by whom? By states that were and are still supporting the aggressor secretly and publicly. Calls for reasoning by states that deliberately disrupted the path of UN dialogues and the efforts of its former envoy, Ghassan Salama, who spoke in an interview a few days ago with CHD, and after being freed from the restrictions of UN bureaucracy, he expressed his anger and hypocrisy of some states. And I quote, "I was stabbed in the back by the majority of the members of the UN Security Council. I no longer had any role. The day Haftar launched his attack on Tripoli, he got the support of most of them, while we were being criticized in Libya because we didn't stop him. Some major states not only supported Haftar, but they colluded deliberately against holding the National Conference in Ghadames," end of quote. Then we hear states talking about no military solution here. If these are the words of the 6th UN envoy to Libya, how can we trust the intention of international community for reaching a peaceful solution and its credibility in the future? Libyans and the people of the world are tired of double standards. Unfortunately, the UN, which is 75 years old, has become strained and helpless, and the Security Council has become just an arena for arguments and empty statements. Therefore, a real and fundamental reform is inevitable. What are the evidence of crimes and violations by the aggressor and his supporters are you waiting for? All of which are documented in your reports and in the reports of the ICC. What about the mass graves recently revealed in the city of Tarhuna? Bodies of children, women, and youth, where up to 220 victims were found so far among those who were buried alive. What about the explosive and mines planted in the homes of citizens south of Tripoli, resulting as of today in the death of 80 innocent victims with the testimony of the United Nations mission? This was nothing but a cowardly act carried out by the militias of Haftar and his mercenaries, reminding us of the atrocities of ISIS terrorists in Sirte. And yet, some still consider this war criminal a partner for peace. In this regard, we thank ICC and Human Rights Council for accepting our request to investigate these violations, and hopefully they will be bringing the perpetrators to justice. What other evidence and proof are you waiting for to see that there is an international formation of mercenaries, whether those affiliated with the Russian Wagner Group or Sudanese, Chadians, Syrians, who are working under the command of the war criminal and his agents? Libyans and all the world saw them fleeing their positions located south of Tripoli on TV. We all saw how the mercenaries were hurriedly evacuated from Beni Walid airport after realizing that their defeat was inevitable. Today, we find them in broad daylight, stationed in the east and hijacking oil fields and ports. Therefore, we reiterate our request to the states concerned to withdraw their citizens and hold them accountable, and those who finance them, otherwise they are complicit in these violations and crimes, and the Security Council should impose immediate sanctions on these entities and individuals. In this regard, I would like to thank the Sudanese government for arresting more than 120 mercenaries a few days ago who were trying to infiltrate the borders to fight in Libya. And I tell my Russian colleague that when we talk about Wagner Group, we're not talking for sure about official soldiers. We're talking about a group of mercenaries that is led by this group. You might not have official soldiers, but there are citizens, and some of them are Russian citizens. So we ask your government, as other governments, to do the necessary steps in order to take them out of my country. Ladies and gentlemen, Libyans are wondering about the reasons behind the presence of some states in international forums that have no ties to Libya. For instance, why was UAE involved in discussing the future of Libya? Is it a neighboring country? A Mediterranean country? Is it a member of the Security Council? If UAE isn't interfering in our affairs as it claims, why do they rush to take a seat in every meeting? Why do they welcome war criminals and give them podium to hold press conferences, to incite war and provide them with funding and weapons? Why were Emirati officers recently featured in video recordings training Haftar militias on Russian Pantsir missile systems? Does Libya pose a threat to UAE national security? UAE is undoubtedly involved in supporting the unsuccessful coup attempt in Libya and in threatening international peace and security in several parts of the world, as indicated in various UN reports, and has not been able to date to defend itself to what was stated against them. And for all these reasons, we no longer accept its engagement in our political dialogues. And it's strange to hear the foreign minister claiming peace and stability and not able to speak about the loads of weapons that he's sending to the other party. In this regard, we call upon the United Nations also, or in this context, in this regard, we call upon the United Nations and international community to limit any future Libyan talks to concerned member states from neighboring countries, Mediterranean countries, and Security Council. If not, then we will demand adding other important countries to assure proper balance while discussing the Libyan matter. In the same context, we are astonished to hear some countries saying today that they are against foreign interference and call for preservation of sovereignty of Libya and its territories, and present unrealistic and unilateral political initiatives in absence of relevant players, as we have been hearing today regarding the so-called Cairo Declaration. Meanwhile, we see statements that threats of direct intervention, as announced by the Egyptian government, drawing red lines inside our lands, as stated by its president, and threatening to arm the youth of our tribes to fight their brothers inside Libya under the excuse of its national security. We totally condemn and reject these threats and remind everyone that their support to Haftar is what threatened international peace and security and regional stability and brought us to where we are today. We will face any aggression with firmness and strength, and we assure that Egypt's national security falls within Libya's national security. But Libya can't be reduced to a region on any country's border. We didn't interfere in others' political affairs, as it's their choice, but no one can impose their system on us. Moreover, Libya is not being governed by a tribal group as being falsely promoted. Rather, our tribes are our cultural and social foundation that we value and cherish, and any attempts to divide us will not succeed. And I remind the Foreign Minister of Egypt that we are the ones who defeated ISIS in Sirte, and we took revenge to those 21 who were killed from Egyptian citizens. We are the ones. That being said, leads to Haftar's militia and mercenaries' control over several oil fields and installations, the latest of which we witnessed the invasion of Wagner mercenaries in a Sharara field, in an act to engage the South in another cycle of chaos, to add more suffering to the people of the South, who already have been through difficult times and lived decades of crisis and marginalization. The recent closure of oil ports has caused a financial loss estimated by the National Oil Company of more than $6.5 billion. And some foreign actors are taking advantage of this issue as a leverage to achieve their objectives and other international affairs, and increase their shares in global markets. In this regard, we emphasize that oil is the wealth of all Libyans, and we will liberate all facilities from militias and mercenaries. And we will use all possible means to resume production. In this regard, my government reserves the right to prosecute all those who incited the blockade of oil fields and prevented the export of oil. What is being promoted is nothing but flimsy justifications when referring to the issue of equal distribution of wealth, which is merely an argument for controlling the state resources, and that will never happen. We affirm that solving this problem fundamentally and ensuring justice for all regions of Libya will only come through ending the transitional periods and engaging on a constitution in which the Libyans define the state governing and economic systems. As noted above, I would like to emphasize on the following. First, choosing our coalition, signing security and military or other agreements with any country is a sovereign and legitimate right and isn't called foreign intervention. Intervention and violation of sovereignty are the practices of some states in terms of transgressing the legitimate government and supporting coups and outlaws with money, arms, and providing political support. And if our agreements are illegal, then all of our agreements signed with your countries, whether security, economic, or oil-related, are also legal. Ladies and gentlemen, the definition of intervention when countries interfere in local affairs against the will of the state. But when we signed as a legitimate government,
you are the only
any agreement is totally our own responsibility. And I respond to the Foreign Minister of Greece when he's talking about respecting UN resolutions. I remind him that he himself didn't respect it by engaging and meeting with the parallel government in the East. That's a violation of the UN resolutions. Second, The Security Council resolutions on the situation in Libya calls on all states to support the government of national accord to extend its control over the entire Libyan territory, and imposing the arms embargo should be on those outside legitimacy, instead of undermining the government and support the coup against it, as in Resolution 2259. Third, we are all aware of the problem of the spread of weapons, militias, and armed groups that are present in most cities and regions. However, the solution wasn't and shouldn't have been by waging wars and fighting. The only solution is through putting an end to the division of the country, reaching stability, and embracing our youth and activating DDR and SSR programs. The solution further includes improving the economic and social situation. Our youth have been victims of conflict and the deterioration of this situation over years, so they should not be all put in one basket. Fourth, we believe in the significance of reaching a comprehensive political solution among all Libyans, a solution that leads to building constitutional institutions so as to move the country out of its current crisis. However, this shall not involve parties that have committed violations and crimes to seize power and militarize the state. Fifth, any political initiatives presented must be national-owned and under the auspices of the United Nations and in coordination with the African Union. We reject any unilateral initiatives that are not inclusive of all Libyan parties, custom-made for some individuals, and presented by impartial states that support rebels. Sixth, we request the presidency of the Security Council to hold a special and urgent hearing this month for the Sanctions Committee, with the presence of all states mentioned in the reports of the panel of experts on Libya and accused of violating the arms embargo in support to the aggression. I do not think that this request is difficult to fulfill and is equally important as today's meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, my government reaffirms its strategic choice to adopt peaceful solutions to the Libyan crisis to exclude foreign interference. It further reaffirms the participation of parties that believe in peace and work towards achieving it, which is in fact the approach adopted by the Libyan state on many occasions. We also call on the United Nations to deal with the issue of political dialogue between Libyans from now on in a different manner, since the circumstances have changed. There is no room to talk again about the outcomes of Paris, Palermo, Abu Dhabi, or others. You must expand the base of the political dialogue stemming from the Libyan political agreement to be more inclusive and include real actors, political parties, and figures from all regions. The only solution to the Libyan crisis and to end the fighting over legitimacy is to return to the Libyan people and end the useless transitional periods. The previous mistakes should not be repeated, and the custom-made solutions to suit certain individuals, groups, or countries must come to an end. The only solution must come through the constitution that was deliberately ignored in all political initiatives, despite the work of the National Elected Constitution Drafting Committee. We must organize legislative and presidential elections as soon as possible, as this will give the opportunity for the aspiring individuals to participate in the elections and prove their popularity and true legitimacy. This is the only solution for our self-determination rather than having our destiny being determined by others. This summarizes the political vision of the government of national accord for those who ask, and it is supposed to be the title of our Libyan dialogue. In conclusion, we call on all Libyans to reunite and side with the nation, and to work together to waste the opportunity for those who seek to divide us. The outcome of the aggressors' adventure was nothing but more killings and destruction for the benefit of other states and individuals. Our beloved people in the East, you have been throughout history a beacon of scholars, elites, intellectuals, and revolutionaries of Libya. We never recall in any time in the past where you sent your men under any pretext to kill and displace your Libyan brothers and sisters. You have always been the voice of truth and the wisdom of the voice of truth, and the independence of Libya and its unity were because of the wisdom of your leaders at that time. We all must remember our founding fathers from all over the country, east, west, north, and south, who contributed with their patriotism in establishing the state and uniting the nation, rather than destroying and dividing it. It is us who could stop all foreign interference, ambitions, and conspiracies, whatever and from whoever they are. So let's work together to build our future with our free will. Thank you.